thanks so much for joining us this week, you guys. We're just kicking off our Acala and Karura joint community call. I'm Robin Whitney, Director of Marketing here, and let me kick it over for salutations and introductions to Betty.
Hi everyone. I think this call is probably short notice, so probably people are still on their way. So we're gathering more people on the stage. So it's Betty here, co-founder of Acala. Yep.
And Dan, if you want to intro yourself really quickly.
Hey everybody, yep, Dan Reeser, leading our growth team at Acala and Karura. And I guess I can also introduce a couple of our guests this week. We've got Alexei from the Interlay and Kintsugi team and Paul from Gauntlet. Do you guys want to give a quick intro? And then of course you'll have more time to give background on what you guys are working on.
All right, hi. Alexei here. Thanks for having me. I'm one of the co-founders of Interlay, I'll spare you the rest for later.
Sounds good.
Hey guys, this is Paul from Gauntlet. For those of you who may not know, we manage market risk for the protocol. So I'm looking forward to diving more into market risk and our parameter recommendations later in this call.
Cool, welcome, and thank you for joining us this week. So just a little bit of housekeeping. If this is your first community call you've attended in this server, we use a couple channels here. I just placed the agenda in the community call whiteboard channel. Keep an eye there for any sort of visual elements or perhaps links that support what the folks on stage are going to be discussing today. If you have any questions during the call, feel free to toss that in the community call chat. We have Josh and other team members standing by to respond in real time, but we're also keeping an eye there for questions. And with that, I think we can jump into some of the latest news on Acala and Karura. So I think something that I know that the growth team's been working really hard on lately is the number of listings that are appearing on our decks. Betty, do you want to give a little context to what we're seeing on the decks at Acala and Karura and what we can expect?
So sure. So I think it's slow coming. Mostly is everyone is trying to open the channels for XCM messages to get across. So that's the HRMP. And then once we've successfully done one, I think a couple of months ago now, then subsequently we now have, I think 4 or 6 channels been open. So that's certainly, very pleased to see, but just bear in mind, this is still very, very early stage for crushing, composable apps. And right now we're mostly doing just transferring assets across to each other, but gradually we'll probably explore a lot more use cases together. And then I think Alexei from Interlay here with their crushing like BTC liquidity will be an interesting point that I think he can go into a bit more detail for use cases and stuff later. But I think then you also have a bit more to add there for the upcoming listings.
Yeah, we've got, like Betty said, we've got quite a pipeline now for listings. So people in the community will definitely see a lot more kind of ramping up, just like we're doing today with the Kintsugi team. This will be kind of a recurring process that we're doing around educating the community around all these different teams that are building in the Kusama and Polkadot ecosystem, what the team is working on, what their token is actually used for. And then that will lead into the bootstrap period most of the time. Some teams may not do a bootstrap, but the bootstrap is actually what we're kind of in the middle of with the Kintsugi team right now. And then, over time we'll be just introducing more and more teams to all of you in the community. So definitely be on the lookout for that.
So that might be a perfect opportunity to really get into it with the liquidity provisioning opportunity that's open right now with Kintsugi and the pair that's listed. With that, I'd love to kick it over to you, Alexei, and if you can introduce yourself a little more and let us know some details about the project and share with the community here about why they may want to get involved.
All right, cool. Yeah, thanks a lot. So, hi everyone. I'm Alexei. I'm, as mentioned, one of the two co-founders of Interlay. We started Interlay 2.5 years ago with the mission to, first of all, of course, connect all blockchains to each other, make interoperability as simple as withdrawing cash from an ATM. Right? You should not care how you don't care how banks settle in the background. You just get your cash. And of course, our vision is that for mass adoption, we need to achieve the same level of simplicity for cross-chain communication. Now, our imminent mission is to make Bitcoin more useful. Today, you have, BTC is growing in importance. It's more than just the largest cryptocurrency by volume. It also has political importance, and we see this again and again in political crisis, where Bitcoin essentially suddenly becomes actively used in a way to actually send cash to people across the globe. Now, unfortunately, to this date, if you want to do anything else with Bitcoin than payments, you typically will end up with a centralized exchange. And now, while centralized exchanges are very important for this on and offboarding between the fiat currencies and Bitcoin and other crypto assets, using centralized exchanges to invest BTC into financial applications might be handy and simple to use, but it counters the whole purpose of BTC in the first place. So there is definitely demand for DeFi and for Bitcoin, right? We see this with the rise of WBTC and other centralized Bitcoin providers. WBTC today, I think if the number is straight, I think it's around $14 billion worth of BTC is locked up in WBTC. That's a huge amount. That's a big number. And it's 20% of that, I think, is a MakerDAO, then Compound, Aave, and so on. So there's definitely a lot of applications that leverage this. Now, the problem is that you end up trusting a centralized custodian with your BTC. And should something go wrong with that custodian, be that a hack, loss of funds, of course, nobody's saying that BitGo will steal your money. It is a reputable company. But still, if we talk about principles, you are at risk. You give away your BTC and you have no remedy. So this is why we've created InterBTC. InterBTC was born out of a research project back in 2018 when, during our PhDs, we were first trying to improve how Bitcoin works by changing Bitcoin protocol rules, and then realized it's not going to happen. Bitcoin is not meant to be changed. Bitcoin is not meant to have smart contracts. So instead, we focused on moving BTC to other blockchains. So what we've built essentially is a decentralized version of WBTC. It's the equivalent of DAI for Bitcoin with a few tweaks. To mint into BTC and also, of course, kBTC on Kintsugi, what you do is you lock Bitcoin with a vault. Now, those of you who are familiar with WBTC will already know the process, right? In WBTC, in the centralized version, you have one custodian, the BitGo company. So you lock BTC with BitGo and they will mint WBTC for you on Ethereum. Now, what we did is we said, well, let's not have one custodian. Let's allow anyone on the internet to become the custodian. Also allowing for self-custody, of course. Now, you don't want to trust someone on the internet with a Bitcoin, obviously, even less than potentially a big company like BitGo. So what we do is we require vaults, as we call them, to lock up collateral in our multi-collateral system. So what a vault does, the vault comes to the system, locks up collateral in different assets, and receives BTC from the users. Now, we have a cross-chain light client that checks where the transactions happen on Bitcoin, and this way we don't need to trust the vault to confirm to us that it got the Bitcoin. We just know it by following the actual Bitcoin blockchain. And then you receive your InterBTC as a user, and you can go ahead and use it in DeFi applications. And of course, this includes Karura and Acala and all the other emerging DeFi applications within the .Zamya ecosystem. Now, once you're done and you want to go back to Bitcoin, what happens is you just burn your InterBTC and vaults return Bitcoin to you. Simple as that. Now, if a vault fails to do so, you will be reimbursed automatically in the vault's collateral. And this way, our system guarantees that you as a user will always get your Bitcoin back, or you will be reimbursed in collateral. And this makes this the only financially trustless Bitcoin bridge or wrap Bitcoin in the entire crypto ecosystem at the moment. Right. Now, so far so good. Now, one thing to point out here, especially since we have someone from Gauntlet here as well, and we're talking about stablecoin parameters, under the hood, the multi-collateral system that we have is quite similar to that of MakerDAO, follows very similar principles. Now, I think I'm short on time probably, right? Or Robin, how much do I have left?
No, you could keep sharing.
Yeah, I think
Alright,
you'll be fine, Alexei. I think people also will be keen to know, or once you finish your explanation, is like maybe share a little bit your launch plan. Now you've launched a parachain on Kusama. What is your plan to kind of like start minting BTC, and how do you see that kind of maybe move across to Karura and other chains? Yeah, and then subsequently maybe also explain a little bit your plan on Polkadot as well, because this is a joint call. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, as Betty already mentioned, we are onboarding as a parachain on Polkadot. In fact, we're already live, and we've just published our launch roadmap. Now, before talking about Polkadot, let's take a quick glimpse at Kintsugi on Kusama. So what we've done so far is we've launched most of the core features of the system, including governance, staking, and so on, and XCM bridges to Karura and also Moonriver. What is happening right now is we have opened a first pool on Karura between Kint and kUSD, which is currently in the bootstrapping phase and is looking for more liquidity. The reason for doing this on our side is to test the waters, experiment with XCM, make sure everything is smooth for when we bring KBTC over, and then open KBTC pools, and of course then apply for KBTC being accepted as a collateral asset to mint kUSD. So as for the timelines, we are essentially in the final hours before KBTC launch. We have already, the team internally, minted first real Bitcoin onto Kusama. We have 44 vaults running on testnet, essentially preparing now to move to mainnet, and we're essentially days away from the actual launch. We will start with a rather low ceiling of $250,000. That's very low, of course, and we'll be then doubling as we fill up. And the goal is essentially just to make sure that we warm up, everybody knows what's going on, because what we have is essentially a stablecoin system with liquidations, where people need to keep an eye on their collateralization ratios, but in addition, this is cross-chain with Bitcoin, so people need to keep an eye on the BTC as well. So that's that. We anticipate that we'll have liquidity to really bootstrap and kick off multiple pools across the Kusama ecosystem within 1 or 2 months. And then essentially this will bring us directly into launch on Interlay. How the process is going to look like here is within 4 to 6 weeks, we're going to, of course, release all the features such as staking, governance, wallet integrations, and then push for InterBTC launch. Now, transitioning directly from Kintsugi to Interlay, we will start with higher ceilings, and in this case with DOT as collateral. And then obviously similar to Kintsugi, we will bridge over to Acala, Moonbeam, and then other parachains based on readiness of the applications there, and really focus on creating new use cases on these parachains that are enabled now by Bitcoin liquidity. And this, of course, will start with applying for collateral in K or aUSD, and vice versa. Of course, one of our very, very big interests is to list LKSM and LDOT as a collateral asset for InterBTC and KBTC. And the reason being is that we see a huge potential of users now being, and specifically vaults, being able to stake their KSM and DOT first with Acala and Karura, and then use that as collateral in our system, essentially earning yield in 2 different parachains at the same time. And this, of course, is a very interesting and attractive thing for us as a community and also the vault operators that we have. I'll stop here, and yeah, if there's any questions, happy to share.
So there's just to summarize for people, there's collateral opportunities on both sides, which is really cool. So when Alexei is referring to KBTC being a collateral on the Karura side, as people may know, if you were on previous calls, we're in the process of discussing this merger of aUSD and kUSD. So if and when that goes through, aUSD will be able to be minted on Karura, and you can use Bitcoin via Kintsugi as the collateral for minting that aUSD. And then that aUSD can go on and be used within the ecosystem. So you may send that aUSD over to a money market like Moonwell on the Moonbeam ecosystem, or maybe a money market built on parallel finance. But it's going to be really cool and interesting to watch all of these kind of use cases cross-chain all be working together. So that's on one side. And then, as Alexei was saying, LDOT and LKSM, these liquid staking products from Acala and Karura, being able to use as collaterals within these vaults on the Kintsugi side. So a really interesting model there. It looks like we lost Alexei. I'll bring him back up. All right, you're back.
Sorry. Technology, hit the wrong button.
No problem. I wanted to ask Alexei if you could elaborate a little bit more. Since the ongoing bootstrap right now is for the Kint token, could you maybe just walk people through a little bit more detail around Kint's kind of utility in this whole system that you guys built, and how that's used within Kintsugi?
Absolutely. So our focus with Kintsugi was essentially also to experiment and see which models work best. Right now, the token is mainly used for governance and paying fees. It also supports staking. Now, our staking is a bit different from what you see on parachains. We have a model that is similar to Curve, and it's really strongly tied into the governance mechanism. To participate in governance, you must stake your Kint. The longer you stake and the more voting power you have, and hence the more rewards you will earn. So, and then essentially in the short term, it's really staking, governance, and transaction fees. Now, in the midterm, what's going to happen is this will move more and more towards a so-called work token, where, or utility token, essentially, the terms really differ and overlap. Essentially, what the Kint token will present you with is additional functionality and beneficial treatment of the actual core product. And this will start with, and again, this is all still quite experimental, and we're running different models and testing to see what makes most sense. But these things will include better insurance rates, right? You are currently insured with, let's say, 110%. Giving you a premium if the system fails and you don't get your Bitcoin. But in the midterm, what we see is offering 110% to people who stake their Kint, whereas as a non-Kint staker, you just get the normal 100, right? So this additional buffer to account for potential fluctuations between the time where you actually can go buy back Bitcoin, that might then flow back to people who are staking Kint already. In addition, we have liquidations, and again, participating in Kint staking will give you potentially better rates and also give you preference to this potential arbitrage opportunity, similar to how keepers work and make it out. So our goal here is really to integrate the token, not just in pure staking and voting, but to make it an inherent part of the core protocol. The way Maker has done it is very interesting. Due to the design of the system, it being a bridge and a stablecoin, right? Not all of the methods are applicable, but we'll definitely see over the next months a few interesting experiments and a few interesting features come along. So that's basically an outlook in the current state of this Kint token. For us, mainly right now, it's again to ensure that the system is decentralized and that the community can really go ahead and propose different collateral assets and really help us expand. And I think to close off, as Dan already mentioned, there's currently a Kint kUSD pool that is live in the bootstrapping phase. It still needs a bit of liquidity, although we see that increasing quite quickly. And this will be incentivized for 30 days. And for us, I mean, the main idea here is to explore how Karura works under the hood, how we can integrate, and then really to make sure that once KBTC is live, that we can bring this over very quickly and then proceed to bootstrap liquidity for Bitcoin as well.
Cool. Thank you so much for that. We do have a quick question in the community call chat. Native BTC, is Interlay keeping native BTC in custody and minting a wrapped BTC on substrate, or Kintsugi in the case of Kusama? Yeah, if you want to just, I think you just explained it kind of thoroughly, but if you want to give like a quick recap to this question specifically.
That is correct. Although with a subtle difference, it's Interlay vaults, not Interlay as a network. We as a team or anyone else in the community has no access to these BTC except vaults who are collateralized. And this is essentially the very, very important part of the system. There is no central bank, essentially. It's a decentralized network, and the outlook essentially is to become a decentralized Bitcoin bank where you have multiple vaults who hold BTC in custody and then can leverage that Bitcoin and also the collateral they deposit for integrations in DeFi. And we'll be actually announcing a few interesting things next year.
Very cool and important distinction, I think. Great. So at this point, we're running a little short on time, but I want to encourage anyone in the community who has more questions on Kintsugi or how to add liquidity to the Kint kUSD pair that is currently in bootstrap phase on Karura. I added some guides into the community call whiteboard, but if there's any questions, we will open up the stage at the end of the call for an open Q&A and invite some people to join us and ask. In the meantime, I'd love to move along to some other folks on the call here. We had some exciting updates since we're speaking a lot about Karura today, but Karura had some liquidation ratios, some changes go into effect, and this is all a part of recommendations from Gauntlet, who is of course providing excellent monitoring and recommendations for risk. So with that, I'd love to First, let me toss it over to Betty, because Betty, if you could add some context on what happened this week with Karura's liquidation ratios, and then we can intro Paul and talk a little bit about Gauntlet.
Yeah, sure. So we meant to bring Gauntlet and in particular like Paul from the Gauntlet team on for a while to actually share a little bit more on the mechanisms of how we manage risks for the stablecoin. Since we've kind of started kUSD and now also aUSD, we've mostly, started with very conservative, very high liquidation ratio, and then gradually dropping it. And then I think most recent proposal is actually increasing liquidation ratio. And so that would be, quite a timely manner for Paul to come on and talk about it. But I think it's important to kind of for all of us to learn why we are doing things like this, why we constantly monitoring the market, what are we monitoring, and why do we sometimes increase and sometimes decrease the liquidation ratio and collateralization ratio? Why can't we just go, aggressive and then just set the collateralization at 110%? And everybody's happy and they can just do multiple multipliers and make their capital really efficient? Isn't that all arbitrary? Why do we need to care about risk at all? So I think those are very, very valid questions there. But to set the stage, I think this week we started to execute the Gauntlet proposal to increase the liquidation ratio. But we're also doing it in a way that is gradual and hopefully is in a way that's lessen the impact. So the increase of liquidation ratio is carried out every 12 hours and increased by either 1% or 2%, depends on whether it's the KR collateral or the LKSM collateral. But I think we can actually share that post so folks can get a little bit more detail. I won't go into detail of those. Then, and next I would just want to hand over the stage to Paul from Gauntlet, to talk about, some of those points I mentioned. So over to you, Paul.
Great, thanks, Betty. Hey, everyone, this is Paul from Gauntlet. As Betty mentioned, we manage market risk for the protocol. You may have noticed us in the forums making parameter recommendations like the ones that Betty just mentioned. Before we dive into our latest set of recommendations that were to increase liquidation ratio and minimum collateral ratio for KR and LKSM, it's probably helpful to provide some context on what Gauntlet does for the protocol and what is market risk. So I prepared a short presentation for y'all today. So what is Gauntlet? We are a simulation platform for on-chain risk management and parameter optimization. So we work with protocols to mitigate risk and improve capital efficiency. At a high level, market conditions are dynamic, and therefore it is important that market risk is managed actively. Specifically for Karura, we provide continuous parameter recommendations for parameters like liquidation ratio and collateralization ratio so that the protocol can be reactive to changing market conditions. So what is market risk? At a high level, depositors need confidence that the assets they have deposited can be retrieved at face value. During catastrophic market events like Black Thursday, there is risk that protocols become insolvent, as we have seen historically for other protocols. By insolvency, we mean when the value of a user's debt position exceeds the value of their collateral. These are essentially default events. And in these cases, other depositors eat up these losses unless the protocol makes whole the loss. In other words, insolvency are losses to the protocol. So in a way, outsized insolvencies are kind of analogous to a bank becoming bankrupt. So it is of utmost importance to prevent outsized insolvency. Karura's liquidation mechanism and risk parameters are great safeguards against insolvency. But as we've seen historically with other protocols, there is a risk of insolvency during adverse market shocks. So how do we define market risk? Market prices, which in turn lead to further liquidations. So these are sort of deflationary spirals. So understanding market risk involves asking questions like, what happens when the price of collateral suddenly falls by X%? But in reality, predicting insolvencies and liquidations is much more complicated as it depends on a variety of factors, including not just volatilities, but individual borrower positions, network congestion, liquidator behavior, etc. On the flip side to risk is the question of capital efficiency. So if we make risk parameter recommendations that reduce risk, that may reduce capital efficiency for users. So we're always balancing capital efficiency, i.e. the amount of collateral a user needs to lock up in order to mint kUSD, against risk, i.e. the downside of liquidations and insolvencies when market crashes happen. So what is Gauntlet doing for Karura? As I've stated, market risk is dependent on many dynamic and sometimes competing factors. So heuristics are not enough, which is why we build agent-based simulation models in order to predict the risk of liquidation and insolvencies under a broad range of market conditions and across different parameterization settings. So we ingest on-chain data, including Karura's individual user account positions, which are then used for our simulation models. Our agent-based models include modeling agent behavior, including CDP users and liquidators. So using these economic simulations and stress tests, we then recommend parameter changes to balance risk and capital efficiency. We make these recommendations to protect the economic security of protocols so that the community can focus on building and our platform will manage the market risks. So I guess now is probably a good segue to discuss our latest set of parameter recommendations. Let me post our link to the Gauntlet risk dashboard. Give me 1 second. Okay, so in the community call whiteboard chat, I just posted a link to the Karura dashboard. So we build these risk dashboards to help inform users and the community of market risk in Karura and the impact of our recommendations. So let's go through, I guess, just the front page first. So I just posted a picture to the front page. You can see we list out our parameter recommendations, including minimum collateralization ratio and liquidation ratio to KAR and LKSM. So at the top, we have our parameter recommendations. Then let me post another picture. Okay, so if you scroll down the page a little bit, you'll see a few metrics. You'll see value at risk, liquidations at risk, and borrow usage. On the left-hand side are these metrics in the protocol's current state, and on the right-hand side is the expected impact of our recommendations. So let's just kind of go through these metrics. Value at risk measures the expected insolvencies in an adverse market shock. So what we essentially do is we run thousands of simulations across different market conditions, and we take the 95th percentile of insolvencies that are predicted out of those simulations, and that 95th percentile insolvency value is the value at risk. Liquidations at risk is the same thing, except we measure liquidations instead of insolvencies. So liquidations are liquidations that can be healthily absorbed by liquidators, by the market, without them turning into insolvencies for the protocol. Borrow usage is a measure of capital efficiency. Without kind of going too deep into the weeds on how it's calculated, essentially it measures how aggressively users are borrowing against their collateral assets. You can see from the impact of our recs, which is on the right-hand side of that picture, our recommendations decrease value at risk, they decrease liquidations at risk, but they also decrease borrow usage. So again, this goes back to the notion of balancing risk and capital efficiency. So if you scroll down a little bit more, you can click on different pages for each collateral asset, KSM, LKSM, and KAR. As an example, let's dive into LKSM, and we'll walk through that page. Give me a second as I post this in the chat. Okay, so I just posted LKSM in the chat, the whiteboard chat. So we made recommendations on LKSM in order to reduce risk. LKSM currently is posing more risk to the system relative to other assets, for example, KSM. This risk is driven by LKSM's relatively low liquidity. So let's just kind of walk through how to interpret these heat maps. In particular, let's go through the top left chart, which is titled Net Insolvent Value. The x-axis is liquidation ratio, the y-axis is volatility scalar. Essentially, what this chart is showing is the expected insolvencies under different volatility conditions and under different liquidation ratio settings for the protocol. As we see, with higher volatilities, there is higher expected liquidation, and one reason why we increased liquidation ratio and collateralization ratio for LKSM is if volatility increases by 2x, which you can see in this chart, there is a chance of insolvency for LKSM. As I mentioned before, one driver behind this is a relatively low liquidity profile for LKSM. For general context, liquidity is really important. Liquidity is needed if liquidators acquiring collateral from the auction mechanism decide to off-ramp out of the collateral asset, in this case, LKSM. We have seen empirically for our other clients, including Aave and Compound, that liquidators do not hold on to liquidated collateral. They swap their collateral for another blue chip asset or a stablecoin, etc., in order to lock in a profitable liquidation. So liquidity is really important. On the right-hand chart is titled Collateral Liquidated. Instead of showing expected insolvencies, this chart just shows expected liquidations under different volatility settings, under different liquidation ratio settings. you can see with higher volatility, actually, there is less expected collateral liquidated. This is because for LKSM specifically, with higher volatility settings, liquidators cannot profitably, healthily liquidate LKSM collateral. That goes straight into insolvencies. So that's why you're seeing lower liquidations, higher insolvencies with higher volatility. An interesting thing is that these charts are different for other assets. For example, for KSM, with higher volatility, there is more expected liquidations, not less expected liquidations. And this is because the market can healthily liquidate KSM-backed kUSD without the positions becoming insolvent. At the bottom is a chart called System Collateralization Ratio. And over here, as you increase volatility, the system's collateralization ratio increases because at the end of a simulation run, when more collateral is liquidated, etc., the collateralization ratio of the protocol increases. So yeah, that was sort of a high-level summary of our methodology, how we think about market risk, and how to interpret these charts in our risk dashboard. Happy to address any questions. Understand that I probably went through a lot in a short amount of time, so also happy to take any questions over Discord chat.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. I think that's a good rundown on we're trying to strike a balance between managing risk versus capital efficiency. There's usually a pull of both sides. I think from a user perspective, we try to optimize for capital efficiency and other aspects of the protocol. But then and then from a risk perspective, if we all go collapse. Would not be fun. So that's constant push and pull dynamics there. So I think in the future, every now and then, I think we'll invite you on to chat to us a little bit more on risk management and also new improvements that you guys constantly be putting on those dashboards and things like that. So so thanks for being here.
Yep, sounds good, and always happy to hop on these calls.
Thanks so much. At this point, I'd love to encourage anyone listening, if you have a question either for Paul or Alexei or any of our items on the agenda today, please go ahead and join the community call stage and raise your hand, and we will invite you up on stage to ask in person. Alternatively, you could drop your question in the community call chat and we will answer in real time via text. So this is a little relevant as I wait for some questions to appear. Our next line on the agenda was an update, and maybe this is brand new news to some folks in our community, but we have an upcoming proposal for the kUSD stablecoin to upgrade, and we've been calling it the union, the aUSD kUSD union, and I believe that this may sort of touch on some of the inherent risk and ratios that may come into play after this takes place. But let's start with an overview of what exactly the union is. Betty, if you can give some context.
Yeah, sure. So essentially, we've built one protocol, like the aUSD stablecoin protocol, and then deploy them onto two different networks, and that's Karura and also Acala. So considering that they are essentially the same protocol on two different networks, and then we've had kUSD as the symbol on Karura since its beginning, and then we also have aUSD as the symbol for stablecoin launched on Acala. At the very beginning, there's a very far-fetched thought about kind of like combining the two stablecoin, and also in a way unite the two economies together, not just the Acala and Karura economy, but actually Polkadot and Kusama economy. Because if you think about it, on the Kusama side, we are using KSM-based assets, and also assets available on the Kusama ecosystem, including KBTC, potentially as collaterals, and also KR. to release liquidity, if you like, out of those assets that you want to hold, rather than you want to trade it off to participate in pools or other applications. So the two ecosystem has been a little bit separated, like Kusama and Polkadot, without bridges, and there's no economic trade or anything. But we are a lot closer at this point, that there could be some bridges between the two, and then there could be essentially a way to merge the two economies. So then, like I think in the last month or so, we've been throwing out ideas of creating this Acala Karura Union. So it's a bit like European Union, where you have one single stablecoin, which is aUSD, that can be issued from both sides, and they can travel freely across two ecosystems. And essentially what that means is if you use KSM, KR, LKSM, and later probably KBTC, minted stablecoin can then be used and participate in activities over on the Polkadot side, and vice versa. And of course, there will be some caps and also risk controls over how much and what sort of parameters we need to operate under. But in a sense, then we are kind of uniting the two economies together, because on the Kusama side and Karura side, it's a much smaller economy, right? They are mainly serve as the technical intrinsic support for the much bigger economy, and that is Acala, Polkadot, and also in Interlay's cases, Interlay versus Kintsugi. So then the technical intrinsic value that on one economy can be realized in this way. We're bringing economic value over from the other side as well. So then it's the proposal of upgrading kUSD to aUSD. So that's the context, and then we've made some progress in the last wee while to figure out implementation plans, exactly how we're gonna carry out this. So there's gonna be a couple of steps before we actually get to the end. But the first step that we can already execute, we'll figure out the way, is upgrading on the Karura side from the kUSD token into aUSD token, essentially treating it like you have let's say USDC deployed on say Polkadot versus deploying on Ethereum. So they are exactly the same token, but they are two sort of contracts with different addresses on the two different networks, right? So the first step that we are taking is upgrading the kUSD symbols, SDKs, and everything on Karura into aUSD. And of course, right now, so that will work because right now there is no direct link or bridge between the two networks, and it will just be operate in an isolation, essentially in its own ecosystem on Kusama. So that's step number one. And then from a user perspective, I guess there's not so much change apart from all kUSD then turn into aUSD. And then when we connect with other chains, it will be aUSD be exported to say HydroDex for their pools, or on Moonbeam it will be aUSD into the pools, money markets over there, and etc. So that's step number one. And then in the meantime, there will be exchanges listing the stablecoin, and then it will just be like aUSD, you can withdraw or deposit onto Karura, and then aUSD deposit or withdraw onto Acala, right? So it's not too much difference from other sort of assets that are originated from different networks. So that will be something that we I guess technically we are ready and comfortable I guess to throw out there for a proposal very soon. And that's number one. And then step number two for us is really connecting the two economy, as having a bridge between Acala and Karura, and then the aUSD on Karura can go over to the Acala chain, and it's 1-to-1. So it's like essentially the same aUSD sent across each other side. So that's the second step that we are currently working on. We've got to design and start implementing the backend code. And so we'll be able to share a little bit more detail of how that actually exactly looks like once we, I guess, have a bit more details on that. And maybe in future community calls, we can share a bit more. But essentially, the idea is when you send aUSD across from Karura to Acala, you get this 1-to-1. Like a swap, but essentially just send the tokens over and it's treated as if it is the same aUSD. And vice versa, right? When you send tokens from Acala to Karura, and so that's one thing. And the second thing is it's gonna create a few more interesting arbitrage opportunities, right? So at a protocol level, they are guaranteed to be 1-to-1 when you send the aUSD from one side to the other and vice versa. But in the pools, then it really depends on market dynamic. Like aUSD pools on Karura may have a different liquidity level, may have a different supply and demand dynamics versus the aUSD pools on Acala side. So it also opens up opportunity for those who, I guess, want to arbitrage the two pools. And as I mentioned before, is like the more trading venues that we are able to create for aUSD, and actually helps with more liquidity and also more arbitraging opportunity, and then supports the peg in a way as well. And then thirdly is other exchange listings, including decentralized exchanges on other parachains, or even just on Acala. There will be a couple more exchanges that will be open for stable swaps, and also for other type of swaps as well, and also on centralized exchange. So with those more venues open, then there's more, I guess, venues that you can trade, you can arbitrage, and then in turn supports the peg and also and liquidity. So that's like overall what is gonna look like likely in terms of like technical solution. And then what's happening next is just step number one. Let's upgrade Karura side of the kUSD into aUSD and get ourselves ready to be integrated into the rest of the parachain ecosystem in Kusama. And then we move on to linking up Kusama and Polkadot. So I'll stop there.
Awesome. Thank you for that overview. It's definitely a change, but I think one that's going to benefit both ecosystems, and we're looking forward to that being implemented. So I just a question off the top of my head. It seems that first, I think that it's going to be a lot easier for Gauntlet since they're going to have one less stablecoin protocol to be monitoring. But with that, does that mean that now the Karura community is going to inherit this sort of more conservative parameters that aUSD is perhaps known for? We often say that Acala is the more sophisticated institutional side, whereas Karura we know to be, it's on Kusama, so a little more chaotic, a little more bolder.
I think I need to clarify that as at the chain level, maybe. But then in terms of how we're managing the stablecoin protocol, as you can see how Gauntlet manages Karura, it is at the same standard as Acala. Otherwise, we wouldn't be so conservatively raising liquidation ratio when the market turns a different way. So in terms of the protocol, it's a very different parameters versus how the chain behaving. So I think from a specific protocol perspective, the risk parameters are actually conform to the same rules. The main thing is looking at the collateral and managing a specific collateral level risk. And then I think since launch, we've been probably as conservative for both sides, for the aUSD and kUSD, as we can. So that's why I think in the original proposal, there is also added supportive mechanisms, apparatus, if you like, to support the management of that, which is, the Acala Financial Council can also oversee the financial parameter setting on the stablecoin protocol on the Karura side, and then the Karura Council can then take a seat in the Acala Financial Council to collectively make that decision. So that's one of those things that we kind of want to propose and get feedback on. Yeah.
That's great clarity. I just shared the post on our community forums, our governance forums, that introduces this proposal. And I suspect that, well, I know that we're planning a lot more content around this to make sure that everybody is up to date with what to expect with the union, other key benefits, and just keep your eyes peeled. We'll be sure to share some updates and blogs shortly.
Yeah, and also just add to that, Robin, just I think because the whole thing is going to be executed in stage, there will be separate proposals and voting and stuff like that as we carry out each step. So just keep an eye on those things coming. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. If anyone has any questions, we'll give it a moment and to get some folks on stage if you want to raise your hand or ask in the chat. But I'll go ahead and thank our two guests today. Thank you so much for joining us, Alexei, letting us know more about Interlay and Kintsugi. And thank you too, Paul. That was really educational on how to utilize the dashboard.
Yeah, thanks everyone being here.
Cool.
Thanks
All
a
right.
lot.
Well, it looks like we don't have any questions this round. Kind of a quiet call for us, but we will be sure to post this up on the Acala YouTube channel and share in the server after we get the recording. So keep an eye out for that. And in the meantime, we will see you guys at the next one. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us, and thanks, Dan, Betty, as well.
Yeah,
Thanks everybody.
Robin. Yeah, thanks everyone.